Hi everybody, it's Gavin Syme, and today we are going to take a look at some naked elements. That's right, naked elements, textures for photographers, brand new collection to SymFX. Decided it was time to get some textures in here for you guys, and we got a really cool set. Let's take a look. I've unzipped these to the desktop, and you'll see in here we have the texture files. There's over 60 texture images, all kinds of elements and textures, and thus the name. It's actually very fitting. There's a lot of just great texture in here to apply to your images. Big feature of the naked elements is the naked textures, and I'm going to take a look at those in just a second. I'm just going to go to Bridge and just kind of show you some of the textures that are in here. Whole bunch, everything from mild to wild, so really whatever you want to accomplish with getting some texture overlay on your images. And I'm going to show you today the features and just how they work, and some quick tips on using textures. So you'll see there's a lot of variety here. Sure, we'll be adding more in the future with the free updates that SymFX always does, and we'll get those out for you in the future. But we got a great set to start off with, and I'm really excited about it. Let's start by opening the actions, because if you're a Photoshop user, those can save you a ton of time, make this really easy. And those loaded up here in the actions palette, naked textures. I should have shown you this. I'm gonna switch this over to button mode so that I can just click these buttons to apply the effects. So I've got some images loaded. You know, I've done the Lightroom and the presets, maybe some actions to my images. Now I just want a final finishing touch. Well, textures are a great way to do that, and just get a little bit of pizzazz, some style, draw the focus right where you want it, and the actions make it super easy. So I'm going to start with the one texture place action. And there's no rules about the action. I mean, you can do it manually, or you can use the actions. You know, you can really have total control over this. So I clicked the texture place action, and what it's going to do is it's going to ask me to place an image. So I'm just going to browse to the textures folder, and I can just browse through here and pick any texture I want. I'm going to use the nature's pavement, hit enter, or click place. Now, see what happened here. It overlaid the texture, but I got the bounding bars on the side. So what's cool, naked elements, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're vertical or horizontal or what size it is. I can move this around, I can stretch it. It doesn't hurt if you distort a texture a little bit, because you're going for the texture. It doesn't have to remain a perfect aspect ratio. This one already fits, so all I've got to do is hit enter to commit the size I want. It's going to go through and automatically set the blending modes and stuff that you need to get a good texture. If you look down here, again, there's no rules about this either. Overlay is a real common blending mode. I mean, you want the image to show through, obviously. You want to take the texture from your image and maybe some color tone, but you still want to be able to see your original image. So what we've got here is it's put the texture, nature's pavement, in overlay mode, and it's got a mask, so I can actually go right in here. And on a mask, if you paint black, it's going to mask it out. If you paint white, it's going to bring it back. So I've got my brush set. Let's set it to about 50% here. And I can actually just paint over this and tone it down, depending on how I wanted this to go. And you can also go down here to the opacity. You can change that up and down, depending on how intense you want it to be. I tend to go a lot of times for milder editing, so it totally depends on what your style is. If you want a real bold effect, you can totally do that. You can change blending modes and play around to get different intensities on the texture overlay. There's one actually included, the texture intensify, right up here. If I click this button, it's actually going to do another blending mode that makes it just a little bit more intense. And let me turn up the opacity just to illustrate that. Now that's a bit much for me, but you get the idea. Let's close down this one and take a look at another image. Here's a nice senior portrait I did last season. Let's do the texture place. Again, it's going to ask us for a texture, and we can browse through any of these. I'm going to take the barren garden, hit enter. Now we see this is a wider image, so the texture's not filling it all up. It gives me the opportunity here. I can just drag this to fit. I want to cover the whole image. It's not going to hurt it that it's distorted a little bit. Press enter, and it's just going to walk right through. Boom. Now, cool thing, it doesn't end with just the masks. There's a couple other actions here. It's a simple set, but it's very powerful. We have the texture center mask and the texture magic mask. Let's take a look at the center mask, which effectively is this auto mask. It's going to go in and kind of a nice feathered center mask texture. So we see it kind of cleared up around his face in the background there, but still kept us some nice edgy texture around the edges. And let me do a on and off here. Again, depending on how intense you want it. Now it did an auto mask, but you've still got your mask down there. So if I wanted to paint something out or take white and paint it back in, I could do that too, depending on what the effect was that I was trying to achieve. Take a look at another one here. Here's another senior portrait. Great background. Let's see what we can do by adding some texture around this and try and give it just a little bit more. Let's try the fire rock. I'm going to place that. Again, it's going to overlay. It fits good this time, so I'm not going to resize it. I'm just going to hit enter. And there we go. Now, it's pretty intense, and also it's on her face and stuff. It's kind of my style to keep some good detail, especially in the face. I'm going to use this other action, Texture Magic Mask, and it's going to do a whole bunch of algorithms and stuff with things under the hood in Photoshop, and it's going to do an automatic mask. Now, this tends to give a pretty subtle result, which sometimes is really good. Of course, you can still go back in if I want to still return some texture to this. I'm going to turn down the opacity of my brush a little bit and just keep some texture out in here, around the dock, in the water. Another thing cool about textures is you can kind of pick a texture based on the effect. So once you kind of get used to the textures in Naked Elements and you know kind of what you're trying to achieve with the image, you'll pick a texture based on the color tone that it's going to add, whether it be warm or cool. This kind of gives a nice warm feel to the image. Turn up the opacity just a little bit so you can see it on the screen there. I might not actually print it this intense, but you get the idea. Let's see what else we got. Texture place. Let's do barbecue. This is actually the metal on an old barbecue. So what's cool about textures is you can just get all kinds of different variables. And there's tons of surfaces in here. Now you can just turn it when you're in this mode. So if it's a vertical image, you can turn the texture to fit exactly the way it needs to be. I click enter. You see how fast this is. I mean, I can almost automate this right through. I almost don't even need to mask this one out. It's more of a mild, subtle texture. I'm actually going to turn it up just a little bit and maybe just mask it out a little bit on them. But you see it gives a nice, really goes good with this rock. It kind of adds some more grittiness to it for a very cool effect. And let's try another one. Ancient Lake. Let's do, yeah. Ancient Lake's going to look good on this one. This is the bottom of a lake. It's taken with a real long lens. You can see this one's subtle too, but look what it does to the sky. You just see this subtlety up here that it adds. Almost like clouds in this image, but it really gives a nice smooth feel, but still gives it a lot of texture. And I don't actually need to mask this, but if I wanted to, I could use my center mask, the magic mask. I could do texture intensify, which makes it a little bit much for me here, so I'm going to back that one off a little. But you see we got a before, make it a little bigger. Before and after. And it looks like I have one more in here. Texture place. Let's do color stone. Very broad range of textures and lots of stones, and I mean there's even fire and sky and all kinds of stuff in here depending on what you're trying to achieve. I'm going to stretch that out to fit, and then I'm going to do some masking along the sky here. Crank up the opacity of this brush just a little bit because I want to retain some quality in my sky and around them, but keeps kind of some great texture in the rocks in this foreground. Change the opacity a little, and here's a before after. So anyway, you get the idea. Over 60 textures, Naked Elements, brand new to SimeFX. Head over and take a peek at it, simefx.com. Have a good day, everybody.